meeting will come to order. And welcome to the Committee on Veterans and Federal Affairs. This is our third public hearing of the 25-26 legislative session.
No war has been formally declared since World War II, yet our Guard is repeatedly sent abroad under vague authorizations that evade accountability. And when Congress won't own the wars, the people cannot hold them accountable either. Meanwhile, Massachusetts needs its Guard here at home. When floods, storms, and blizzards hit our state, it is the Guard that rescues neighbors, clears the roads, and stabilizes our communities. Yet deployments abroad often overlap with crises at home, as we've seen in recent years with floods and storms. Our communities lose readiness when our Guardsmen are stretched too thin across the world.
The primary reason I support this bill is incredibly personal to me. I joined the Navy in 1999, and in January of 2005, I was stationed on board the USS Ronald Reagan. During January, my best friend, Benjamin Farrell, was killed due to an accident aboard the carrier, leaving behind his parents who loved him, a brother who idolized him, and a fiancée who was pregnant with his child. I was one of the two people that brought him home to his family in Minnesota. And I still remember being told upon arrival at the airport that I had to open the coffin before his parents got there to see if any embalming fluid had leaked. The effects that I suffered from this event were long-lived. For years, I regularly had nightmares, and I'm sure I suffered from at least some form of depression. I had difficulty finding a reason to get out of bed and start my day. At one point, I reached out to the command that I was at and expressed concern about my mental well-being. At that point in time, I was told not to go see a therapist by the highest-ranking enlisted person at the command, as they might put me on antidepressants and I could lose my security clearance. Now, I followed that horrible advice, and I think I was lucky that I didn't try and hurt myself. Many others in similar circumstances were not so lucky. Now, I don't want to conflate what I went through with what service members that go overseas go through. Just as I can't imagine what Ben's family went through, I can't imagine how many others have gone through things worse than what I did. And the National Guard suffers particularly from this. Overall, U.S. population suicide rate in 2018 was 18 deaths per 100,000. Active duty military had 24.8 per 100,000, and the National Guard was at 30.6. We have people coming back after fighting in these undeclared conflicts. They're being forgotten and they're suffering for it. I can't think of a bill that would have as great an impact as Senate Bill 2471.
Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of the Constitution stipulates that only Congress has the authority to declare war. Yet since 1942, and after decades of undeclared aggressive military interventions and invasions, including every war of this century and the global war on terrorism, the legislative branch has continually abdicated its responsibility for deciding to change the state of the nation from peace to war. Clause 15 delegates to Congress the power to call forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Yet Guard troops have had continuous and extended roles in overseas conflicts, particularly since 9/11, supporting more than 1.1 million deployments to the Middle East and elsewhere, upwards of 900,000 men and women, and more than the Marine Corps. Guard and reserve units made up about 45% of the total force sent to Iraq and Afghanistan, and received about 18.4% of the casualties. As you all know, our Guard has been deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan with several units deploying twice or more. And they're also in permanent rotation to the Horn of Africa, and were just sent there in July. Our troops just returned from Poland. Notably, at their send-off in April, Major General Keefe told them their mission was to, quote, make sure Russia goes no further. We have not declared war on Russia. The reality is that all of these missions are absent any approval or consultation of state legislatures, and all contradict this constitutional intent of state control over their militias.
every branch has a mission, right? Protect by land, air, sea. I don't know off the top of my head, but the National Guard's mission, is it to protect the state?
It has a dual mission, which I believe Senator Vellis would confirm. It is a dual federal-state mission.
Thank you.
This doesn't put a stop to them deploying. It only asks that the title, that it goes through Congress and the legislative branch. That's all. And if it does, then they can be deployed.
Thank you.
So what do we, and again, I appreciate everyone coming here today offering testimony on this. And one of the challenges that I have is that we have a duly enacted federal law, essentially Title 10, that provides a framework from when a president can federalize the National Guard, right? Duly signed by the President of the United States. National Guard can be federalized, nationalized, however we want to say it. And I know you were here, sir, and you just referenced it before. You know, you've got these kind of this Article 1, Article 2. And what I'm really stuck on with this is, you know, the constitutional question. You just raised the Constitution. What I'm stuck on is how a governor of a state, when you have a president, whatever that process is, invoking Title 10, whether it be the F-15s and soon to be F-35s in my district at Barnes or elsewhere, right, to go overseas to participate in some type of a conflict. What legal authority does Massachusetts have to say no? That's what I'm stuck on. And again, we thank you very much for answering the question. No states have done it thus far. To your point, different states are contemplating it. But I would be really curious about our ability when a federal statute is invoked, specifically Title 10, to in essence say no.
The Supremacy Clause.
See, I
That
would.
supersedes legal statutes. The
So-
Constitution is supreme.
So what I would say in that regard is that the Supremacy Clause actually makes it harder, actually bolsters kind of what I'm getting at, is that you've got this duly enacted statute from the federal government competing with, if presumably this were to pass, a state statute. I would argue the Supremacy Clause kind of bolsters the questions that I'm raising, right? You've got potentially a direct conflict between a president saying, hey, Massachusetts, I want you to go to fill in the blanks. The governor of the Commonwealth, based on this law, if it were to go forward, saying, in essence, no. And I just have real questions about the legal permissibility of that.
I'd like to see it go forward and to the point where these questions do get brought up and to let the lawyers, debate these issues, because there's two versions to be debated or two arguments to be made on the Supremacy Clause from where I'm sitting and the one you mentioned. So I'd like to see it get to that point. That's the proper place where this should be debated, and I think it should also go to the general court, and it should be heard by the entire body.
One thing I wholeheartedly agree with what you have said is that, to me, it is absolutely insanity the way that the federal Congress, and I'm going to use your word because I think it's the right word, has abdicated their authority in this space. As was correctly pointed out, there hasn't been a declaration of World War II. There's this other legal framework that we haven't gotten into, the War Powers Act, that we could talk about. But it's just, there are some very legitimate legal, national security, and constitutional questions that I think we need to contemplate as a committee on this bill.
From hearing from folks who have served and folks who are concerned about it, and I did not know how often the Guard has been deployed abroad in foreign conflicts and have been killed in foreign conflicts that they did not expect to serve in. I do have a lot of concerns about the constitutionality of what our president likes to do at the moment, but I filed this bill earlier before I knew that we would have a president like this. I did not know that I did know that we hadn't issued declarations of war since World War II, but I did not know in how many conflicts our National Guard has been called up to serve in at least 4 continents. So I think this conversation is worthy of continuing, not just about the National Guard here, but about the constitutionality of our president's behavior, potential president's use of our forces, including the National Guard. I remember really clearly during the beginning of the COVID epidemic when I asked strongly for the governor to activate the National Guard to go into nursing homes and protect people who were dying because there was a lack of staff and a lack of trained people. We need the National Guard, and we need it here, and we need it for purposes that, in my view, it was intended for. So I hope we will have this conversation, and I appreciate very much the knowledge that you all bring, and I hope we can be constructive and moving forward in some way. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yes, I'm Major General Dennis Leach. I served 35 years and 1 month in the Army Reserve, and I served as my last assignment was as the commander of all of the Army Reserve in the 6 New England states, and my headquarters was from 2002 to 2006 at Fort Devens, Massachusetts. I'm concerned at this point that we have a misappropriation or misuse of the Army Reserve and the National Guard in particular. We see the National Guard in Washington, D.C., for instance. And what they're doing there now is gardening and landscaping and picking up garbage. This isn't good for readiness or lethality. It doesn't do anything to make our military more effective. We have a military budget that's out of hand, and we have a situation where it's too easy to go to war and stay at war today. There's no skin in the game. I often ask audiences in the United States when I speak if we had a war surtax or a draft, how long we have stayed in Afghanistan. We've stayed in Afghanistan for 20 years. 20 years of repeated cycles of hope and wishing and dying. It's wrong, and it's needs to be addressed, and I think that the issues that you're bringing up here are critical to this, and I applaud you. I've been working on this since 2013, and I applaud your issues here, and it's not an easy thing to come up with. It's not an easy thing to address, but it's one that as a nation we need to.
I would like to quote something from the chat. Brian Z put in a clarification from Title 10 that may answer some of the questions. It says here that while the Secretary of War can bring to active status a reserve component for 15 days a year, units and members of the Army National Guard of the United States or Air National Guard of the United States may not be ordered to active duty without the consent of the governor of the state in question. And I think this is what gets to the point. It's not a question of whether the president is the commander-in-chief. That's clear from the Constitution. The question is, what authority does the commander-in-chief have, and under what circumstances? I believe it was Chair Valise who said earlier, Article 1 makes it clear that it's Congress that declares war. Article 2 says the president is the commander-in-chief. But being the commander-in-chief does not make one a king or a queen with unlimited power. That was the intent of the founders. They could only call up troops into service when given the authority of law. General Stewart said earlier that the national security situation has changed since the Constitution. I think that is certainly true. That our laws need to change to reflect that. And if they don't, we need to follow the law as it's written. As John Adams said, we are a society of laws, not of men. And I think we need to live that, and I think we need to uphold that in the spirit of our founders.
The Libertarian Party is America's fastest growing political party. A significant portion of the party's growth is directly tied to the presence of Gulf War era veterans who have coalesced nationally around Defend the Guard. As Libertarians, we believe that the manner in which we should accord our troops respect should not just be a reflection of thank you for their service, but to rise in protest against engagement in economically driven foreign misadventures, police actions, and proxy wars, which serve to place the brave men and women who serve our nation in mortal danger. This legislation is straightforward: to forbid the federal government from conscription of National Guard troops absent a formal declaration of war. The current approach to overseas military deployment is the enactment of an authorization for use of military force, AUMF, a political dodge that defers ultimate decision-making to the executive branch. By abdicating their responsibility, Congress is refusing to exercise its duty under the U.S. Constitution. It is my belief that this legislation will effectively force the federal government to revert to the constitutionally mandated congressional declaration of war. Additionally, history is replete with examples of National Guard troops serving overseas during times of great tragedy, here at home in the United States. The national security issue should be focused on the United States of America and its communities. That's the role of the National Guard. We have a well-developed military all over the world that should be focused on these quote-unquote national security solutions. Again, many of these National Guard units are focused, if you will, in terms of their skill sets, on issues that affect their state. Tennessee, 700, anyone see the devastation in Tennessee recently? 700 Guards members left. Why are they being sent over? And some could argue, too, that the National Guard can be, frankly, a cheaper alternative. Staff the military adequately, have them respond federally to military situations, have the National Guard be prepared for issues here in the Commonwealth, where I live in the state of Rhode Island, or places like Tennessee, or some of the weather-impaired areas in this country. That's their job, not to be over there fighting proxy wars. How is it possible that we have natural disasters almost becoming a weekly news event, and we don't have adequate resources to react to them? Staff up the Guard for what they're intended, which is, and I'm not a fan of this word as a libertarian, but the defense of the homeland. And the defense of the homeland can incorporate so many things, weather-related. You know, we've got a National Guard that's being deployed. And by the way, I congratulate your references to the Posse Comitatus Act, because so many Americans don't even know what the Posse Comitatus law is in this country. We're facing that as the next level of expansion. The executive branch needs to be drawn back. Federal government needs to stick to the 10th Amendment of our federal Constitution, and states need to adequately fund and have the resources necessary to, quite frankly, save lives and do the amazing work they did from everything from COVID to any one of the natural disasters that have happened in this country.
Questions? Anyone else? Sir, appreciate your advocacy on this. Thank you very much for testifying today.
Thank you for your hospitality. Again, it's outstanding.
Thank you very much.